Well, hello viewers and welcome to a brand new format, the Just Ride Bike Show, in which I bring on interesting guests from the world of cycling to talk all things bike. Not a long and winding podcast, but a half-hour concise, fun show. And today's guest is responsible for one of the most interesting bikes, in my opinion, launched in the last year. So we'll find out how the bike was developed and the challenge of a small company being heard in a market awash with big bike brands, and also talk about some hot topics right now. And a quick fire round at the end of the video, definitely worth hanging around for. So let's dive in and meet him. How's life treating you? What have you been up to? You been riding your bike much recently?
Life is good. Haven't been riding my bike, if I'm honest. Like a lot of people, I was quite ill actually over the Christmas holidays. So I'm just back finding my feet. And slowly I've been eliminating all the excuses not to get out on the bike. So I just received an order this morning with some clothing in it. The Zwift subscription is back online. So I think, yeah, I'm all out of excuses now. Next week is maybe this week actually. Tomorrow. There you go. I've said it.
Start training for your 2025 events and goals.
Yeah, exactly.
So the last time we actually spoke in person, I think, was at Sika Classic last year in California, which is almost a year ago, and you launched your first road bike, the Sika there, which is a really interesting bike. I've ridden it here on the channel. So how's that bike being received? What's it been like almost a year after you launched it? Is it, selling them in good numbers? And
yeah, we are. I think despite general market conditions, the bike has been super well received. Thanks to you and thanks to all of the other independent media outlets. It's fantastic to see that those type of outlets are still alive and well. We did launch it at Sea Otter. However, we probably didn't start delivering the frames until end of August or September. So I thank and I'm very humbled and grateful to the people that did put deposits down in April and May, and most of which, the vast majority of which, hung on and hung with us. And to be honest, that was, in part maybe somewhat overly optimistic and me thinking I could deliver it a little bit quicker, but also just supply chain issues. I think when people talk about supply chain, they have this image of mountains of bikes and warehouses, etc. But I think you could probably sum it up quite briefly in saying none of these big brands want any more of what they already have, but they're all desperately trying to create new products. So the supply chain is actually very congested, and so just took a little bit longer. But we started delivering in September, and it's been fantastic for us, to be honest. Yeah,
that's good to hear. I can't imagine how nerve-wracking it must be. Spend however long developing a bike in secret for a year, say, and then you launch it, and then you get that sort of initial public reaction. Is that you kind of watching it through your fingers sort of moments, or are you?
Yeah, absolutely. This is our second time doing it. We did it obviously with our Assassin frame a few years back. It is a little bit of a stressful moment because I think maybe combined between R&D and tooling costs before you sell your first frame, you're probably in for about 200,000, maybe even close to $250,000. So for a small brand, it is a significant outlay. Of course, you get some signs along the way. Ultimately, I mean, you're kind of following your path and on what you believe is right, and you're hoping you can take your existing customer base with it. But probably, I don't think we expected the reaction to be as positive as it has been. So that's been fabulous.
Cool. And it's quite an interesting bike as well, because it's not really a cookie cutter bike. We've got, the big thing for me is the tire clearance, 40mm tire clearance. So where does that come from, that desire to create a road bike with such wide tire clearance? Is that you looking to crystal ball? So where's the inspiration?
I do wish we had a crystal ball and they were accurate. I suppose, I'm about 25 years in this industry now, and prior to 51, I worked for a lot of the main brands, or in the form of a distributor or partner, etc. And when we started 51, I suppose one of the reasons was to do things a little bit differently, that we started to see things that we just thought could be done better. I suppose it's a common enough trait. We did it with the Assassin. We took quite an innovative stance with the adjustable geometry set on that. And the Sika was kind of an extension of that again. Just look, it's probably the easiest thing in the world to follow everybody else's trend. But I think it's more interesting when you have your own vision and your own vision of what can make this product better and essentially what the future holds. And that's one of the advantages. There are many disadvantages, of course, to being a small niche entity and having to compete with, huge companies like Giant, Trek, and Shimano. But one of the beauties are, it makes us very, very nimble. So yeah, look, we just had an idea. We had an idea where we thought the market was going, some of the issues around maybe current bikes and, current thinking. And the other, I suppose, I think big advantage we have is through our custom, our kind of deep custom. We learn a lot there in terms of bike fit, geometry, feedback from, we're very lucky we work with probably the majority of the best bike fitters in the world. So be able to pick their brains and see what's wrong with the current crop of bikes, etc. And just to see time and time again, the same issues pop up, neck pain, lower back pain, bike too low, etc. If you start to see and hear that 496 times, you think, okay, we've got an issue here. So what the Sika allowed us to do was to bring a lot of the learnings from that custom division and bring it into a more affordable, more attainable product.
It must be tough for a small company to compete with a big company. I mean, you can't. The marketing budgets dwarf your entire sort of revenue, I guess. And I guess you have to create a product that stands out, if not trying to emulate what Specialized or Trek are doing, to do something different. And then you have that bespoke frame building business to give you that sort of real world data, and you see opportunity to do something different that actually suits what people want to do with their bikes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we don't have a marketing department. I'm embarrassed to say we don't even have a marketing person. Now, however, again, the upside to that is everything we do is product led, and everything we do has to enhance the customer's experience. So those two things remain our North Star. And I think if we continue to think in that manner, ultimately we'll continue to grow. It's what's got us to where we are today. We somewhat, run the business like something out of the 1920s. We don't have any paid marketing. We don't boost any social media posts. We don't do any kind of AdWords. But I think just the fact that the product is remarkable helps, and it's kind of old school word of mouth. And again, thankfully, people within the industry, I do think they pick up on it, and that we are doing things slightly differently. And it's not just doing differently for the sake of doing differently. It's just having the, if I may say it, the balls to go a slightly different direction to some of the bigger players.
Because there is a lot of marketing in the bike world, for good or bad, and you rely on word of mouth and your product selling itself and marketing itself. A lot of the marketing is based around like race bikes. It's all very race focused, pro focused, and your bike isn't a race bike. You told me off calling it an endurance bike. It's not an endurance bike. It's an all road bike. So how do you? The bikes aren't really marketed in the same way. There isn't the same marketing sort of race focus. How do you market this bike? It's the sort of bike that the average cyclist should ride, but how do you market that sort of average bike for the average guy? Sort of is a tricky message to put out there.
It is a tricky message, and again, we learned a lot. I referenced our Assassin gravel model, and that really had continues to have some really innovative, different features. And as a small brand, it's very difficult to articulate and communicate these en masse. So whilst you really want to, put a product out there that you can really stand over and you're 100% proud of, you just got to be mindful of the fact that, how do we communicate this? For the Sika, we were fearful of it being branded or reverse fit into the endurance category, which, Endurance 1.0 was essentially, let's take a race bike, let's put a huge head tube on it. It doesn't really matter if it's ugly because this guy's 70 and he needs this bike. The way we've come about it with the Sika is completely differently. So the Sika, just to put things into perspective, it probably is a little bit shorter than, let's say, a very common popular model like an SL8. But more importantly, the stack height is, I would say, about 12 to 15 millimeters higher. And that's just allowing normal people like you, me, and many people watching this video, to get into a position that is comfortable, number one, but more importantly, biomechanically efficient. Because again, one of the learnings from dealing on the custom side of things is a lot of people are just on bikes where the handlebar saddle drop is just too aggressive, too extreme. And we start to see a lot of problems with that. We start to see neck pain developing over long distances, lower back pain. We see a reduction in power output. And we also see some even aero benefits. So even if the Sika is not an aero bike per se, what we now know, if we start to track a lot of the more modern findings with TT bikes, for example, and then contrast that to a bike where you've got this massive drop in handlebar to saddle, these wrists and forearms, cylindrical in shape, hugely inefficient. So look, there's a number of reasons that would point to the fact that I think as time goes on, we'll start to see higher stack heights, even in I think in competition and in aero race bikes for the reasons I just mentioned. I think so.
Interesting. I don't like pigeonholing or categorizing bikes, but it's kind of useful, almost essential for helping explain, communicate who a bike is for, so the person knows if it's for them, like a race bike or a touring bike, say. And there's a lot of buzz around all-road. It's not a new term, it's been around before, but would you call the Sika an all-road rather than endurance, to point to sort of riding you can do, a bit of dirt, gravel, road, more laid-back geometry? And do you see that all-road, that space, becoming a more popular space with more bikes and more offerings from other brands?
Yeah, I think I'd be comfortable referring it to as all-road. I can absolutely see that category growing. The term we've used is, look, this is a race bike, but for real people. Okay. So it's actually rectifying the things that are wrong with a lot of race bikes. Again, one of the issues with the initial endurance 1.0 bikes is they just felt dead, whereas the Sika uses a very assertive dynamic handling profile. So anybody, and I haven't met anyone that doesn't, anybody that likes cornering and descending will really love the Sika. But it's just a more comfortable bike to ride. So I can see that category growing certainly over.
Back to tyre clearance. Tyre clearance of 40 on a new Sika, and we're seeing tyres getting wider. I've been testing the new Pirelli 40mm wide tyre. What's your thoughts on tyre width? Is it a fad? Is it a long-term trend? I know some of the pros are riding 28s and 30s. Do you see more riders embracing wide tyres, and how wide do you think we could go?
Yeah, it's definitely not a fad. It's if it is a trend, it's a trend that's here to stay. So I think Pogacar is actually riding 32mm tires, or he certainly has ridden them in the past. So I think that says a lot that, normal guys like you and I should probably be riding 34s. And the idea of allowing the Sika to accommodate 40mm tires is somewhat just future-proofing it. One of the things we're not too fond of here at 51 is this old traditional model year where the consumer buys a bike in January and then September rolls around and he's told that he's got an old model. I don't think it does anybody any good in the long term, the brand, particularly the end user who's spent their hard-earned cash. So, we can definitely see the trend going towards wider. And from an engineering stance and point of view, it made sense just to push the envelope a little bit and just to accommodate up to 40. And also maybe just on a bit of a so if we look at the bikes being used in Unbound, Unbound is very challenging event, but it's not particularly challenging for the bikes unless they get that peanut butter mud. But they tend to use a lot of road bikes with wide tires. So it is a bike that could fall into some sort of light or race gravel also.
It's interesting how the categories are being blurred, aren't they? Like race bikes with fat tires and endurance or road bikes could do gravel. I mean, some people might look at a Sika and say it's a gravel bike, 40mm tire, that's all they need. And then where they leave gravel bikes, I mean, and it's almost like the goalposts are constantly being moved forward and forward to keep up with, to make it. In the past, you had your race bike, your endurance bike, and your gravel bike, and your touring bike, and they're all categorized by tire size, but tires are getting bigger, pushing them all out, and then there's so much overlap. It almost makes it not impossible, but really tricky to choose the right bike for the riding you're doing with so much choice. And you could go race bike or endurance bike or gravel bike and do the same riding almost.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really just about optimization. Your earlier question in relation to Sika and maybe the trends of the tires, I think from an aero standpoint, we probably know that 28 are the most efficient. From a rolling resistance point of view, maybe it's 28, maybe it's 30, maybe it's 32, depending on the different tire. But from a comfort point of view, it's probably 34. And I know you've been testing the 40s. So I think I think the consumers are obviously, there's no shortage of media. So I think they're a lot more informed than definitely 10 years ago and even 5 years ago. I think platforms like YouTube are fantastic for things like that. And I think you'd probably have different clients optimize a Sika or indeed any bike for slightly different things. So one will want that 28 raw speed, whereas someone will want that 34 mil tire, and they just really want to prioritize comfort and having that additional little bit of rubber on the road.
Okay. And when you are designing a bike, your bike doesn't have the UCI sticker on the seat tube. It's not a UCI approved race bike. But do the rules come into play when you are designing a bike? Is that a consideration, or do you design outside of rules?
So the UCI accreditation, for the most part, is essentially a copy and paste of an ISO standard. So automatically, the bike would pass all ISO standards. The only difference being then, the UCI have these kind of red boxes that every tube, every tube or every tube junction must fit into. So, for example, that's why you see a lot of the aero bikes, the seat stays meet the seat tube at pretty much all the same level. And the reason for that is the UCI doesn't allow that meeting point to go any lower. It does on a TT or a triathlon bike, for example. But to answer your question, we would definitely keep them in mind. I think the UCI accreditation, I think it costs about 12,000 euros. We've opted not to do it for the Sika, but the Sika would pass it in the morning, so there's no issue there. But I think a lot of people think that the UCI have come up with this. It's really, for the most part, it's just an ISO standard which all bikes would be produced to and adhere to in any instance.
And that's a safety standard, the ISO. That's about
exactly,
structural
safety. To break it down without sending anyone off to sleep, you could probably broadly split it into two different types of tests: impact and fatigue. So a lot of it's based on frontal impact, and then obviously the fatigue ones are more to highlight any issues that may highlight or that may arrive over time.
That's interesting, because I think some people think the UCI rules are a bigger factor on bike design, and actually we've seen like the Campagnolo Aero bike come out with wild seat tube because some of the rules have changed around tube dimensions.
Yeah,
it sounds like you're saying they don't actually come into it too much, and when you are designing a bike.
No, I think maybe in 2025 and beyond we'll start to see more. I think from my perspective, I think maybe the factor Austria was probably one that optimizes. So the ratio is essentially changed from 3:1 to 8:1, which allows a lot kind of deeper tubing profiles, etc. But just because you can go to 8:1, I don't think it means people will, because you get a situation where a bike may perform excellently at 0 degree yaw, but all of a sudden it's terrible at 6 degree yaw or 8 degree yaw. So a lot of interesting factors there. But I do think we'd probably start to see more innovative solutions, hopefully this year and next. I think a lot of that stuff, and again, this is only my assumption, but I think a lot of it's been put on pause. I mean, where are the real aero bikes gone? We've been told it's the way to go, and we can save all of these watts, and now we're starting to see all the big entities merge models, and I think it's more a case of maybe being counters saying, look, we've got way too much stock downstairs and we need to get rid of these line items. So personally, I'd like to see more aggressive aero solutions.
It's been interesting. Like the last few years, been like Aero's everything, and then it's been like the all-rounder being everything, and some brands have very different approaches to having like one bike or three bikes to do. What's your take on that? Do you think you want to see more aero bikes, more extreme aero, or do you think and what do you think the consumers want as well?
I'd love to see more aero. I think the knowledge is there and the tech is there. I think that for the vast majority of people, the bikes that people are buying are probably ill-suited to them because they're designed for professionals or Tom Pidcock or whatever. But there's also a counter argument to say that the professionals themselves, the Tom Pidcocks or whatever, are somewhat underserved because the bikes may not be as racy. as they need. So I think it's a bizarre situation we have at the moment. And show my age somewhat, but you can trace this back to really, 1999 was the first time, to the best of my knowledge, that the Tour de France was won on a stock geo frame. Armstrong won it on an off the peg Trek. And that was a watershed moment for the bike industry, because up until then, it didn't matter if you were being sponsored by Bianchi or whoever, your frames would be custom made and they'd be made by a local artisan. And now we have this really bizarre situation where, I do believe that the bikes that the professionals are riding are probably not bespoke enough. And I don't think they're necessarily a good fit for the people buying them. So it's a funny situation.
I guess cycling is interesting that way. You can essentially buy a pro race bike, and I guess it's great for a consumer who wants the ability to buy a pro approved race bike and say a Tour de France winning bike. Interesting what you're saying about the pro being held back on a bike that maybe isn't as extreme. Could you see bike being more extreme for the pros, being even faster, more aero, or maybe like get rid of the weight limits on bikes? Would that help introduce
I don't think the weight limit's probably going to change anytime soon. I do think we could see more extreme bikes, but let's just take even just strip it back to maybe a more nuts and bolt or even common sense approach. I referenced Tom Pidcock. Now, Tom Pidcock is arguably probably the best descender. He's just magical to watch him. The reality is he's so good. He could take a shopping trolley down one of those mountains and
I want to see that video.
Yeah, probably do the same thing. But if you take, let's say that recently retired rider Thibaut Pinot, I think, from Française Jeux. I mean, there's a guy who really, really struggled with descending and cornering to the point that he lost leaders' jerseys, etc. And that just wouldn't have happened back in the kind of mid-90s, because there are key attributes that you can alter within his bike fit and his geo to make that bike want to go around hairpins.
Interesting.
I think there's an example where, we've kind of thrown the baby out with the bathwater and it just makes no sense. There's another argument to say that you could even further, believe it or not, optimize maybe Pidcock's bike to allow him to descend even faster again. So I think that aspect of it is really fairly basic, nuts and bolts. We started to have some very informal conversations with not bike brands, but with some teams last year, whether we could actually produce a custom bike that would look like a stock big brand bike.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So it is interesting, and I do believe that pendulum will eventually come back. But
it used to happen a lot in the old days, and obviously steel bikes were easy, and in the early days of carbon, when they're round tubes, Harley made bikes through a Tyler.
That's right. Yeah.
But I guess with the Aero shapes, it's kind of tricky to make.
I mean, it isn't. It would mean. I mean, it could be done relatively inexpensively as well, where the tube profiles could be film and wound, for example, and then the frame could be produced tube to tube. But I do think, another part of your question was, would I like to see? I would. I think with all of the insight we now have in terms of wind tunnel testing and aero advantage, there is an argument to say, well, is that really a benefit to me when, my goal is to go out with my friends and go on a coffee ride. But certainly for the top tier guys, I'd love to see more aggressive solutions in place.
I'd love to see a world where the rule book is thrown out and it's like F1. Well, they have the rules, but it's much more extreme, because I like riding a race bike. I don't need a race bike. I don't race, so why am I riding a race bike? I just need like the Sika or something with comfort, but still fast and exciting ride. But doesn't need to be a bike that a pro can race at the highest level. So I'd love to see the rules being thrown out and see what that looks like, and more of an arms race. I guess it's come down to budgets and like the old Team GB with the track bikes.
Yeah, absolutely.
One-off bikes, almost one. You could buy them, but you couldn't actually buy them.
And
they were an extreme expression of when you remove the rules, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think most people are probably counting down the start of the F1 season again. However, no one expects to drive around in the same car as Lewis Hamilton, but yet, that's the way the bike industry is currently set up. So it is a strange one.
Yes. So let's cover some more tech trends. We talk about wide tyres and your thoughts on there. Another feature on the Sika, which we're seeing increasingly on road bikes and gravel bikes, is a UDH dropout introduced by SRAM. How big a thing is that? Because lots of new bikes are coming out with it. Some brands aren't doing it. SRAM have their group set designed for it. Shimano don't. So, do you see it being a big change, a big tech trend, and should consumers influence their buying decision to a bike with UDH?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So overall, I mean, I thought it was a great idea just to really eliminate. I mean, everybody knows anyone that's been, flown to Mallorca to ride the bike and broken their hanger. It's such a stressful moment if you haven't taken one with you. So from a consumer point of view, it's a nightmare. From a bike store point of view, it's a nightmare. If ever you see in those workshops, they've got these things where they're trying to keep everything. They've got 200 different variants of hangers. And then from a brand's point of view, I can understand the big brands, wanting some sort of closed system and having their own. But for us, it was very refreshing to see just one system, and that, if you needed one, you could get one from Birmingham to Bangladesh. The chance of you finding one of these is relatively easy. So I think from that perspective, it was absolutely fantastic. I think obviously SRAM did use it as a little bit of a Trojan horse, obviously, when they released their updated Explore group. And maybe that wasn't as positive. And I think the other thing worth noting is, have we just moved the problem somewhere else? The humble rear hanger, whilst we had far too many variants, it had two purposes in life, isn't it? It was to obviously to be that link between frame and derailleur, but more importantly, it was produced to fail. And I think the situation, my son, for example, races downhill, and he's got a UDH system, and it's so tough that we've basically just moved the problem from the hanger to the mech. So I've already replaced a new, I don't know what it is, Dior or SRAM, whatever it is, mech. Old school, trying to bend a long cage mech. I don't know. We use it on the Sika. It makes perfect sense too, but I'm surprised maybe at how many people are using it to maybe form their purchasing decision, when I don't think it's going to make that much difference for them, if I'm honest.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because they feel like they're being forced into it. And I guess it comes down to, Shimano and SRAM are two sort of group set giants, Campag, less so. Where do you see the sort of group set battle going? Do you think SRAM are kind of winning the battle now between those two companies? And they seem to have won the dropouts. Getting all your bike companies to change the dropouts on the frame is quite a big thing, isn't it? It's not a small achievement at all. It's like
subliminally, massive. It's very, very powerful. And I'm told that even internally in SRAM, they couldn't believe the take up and how well it was received. I think on the higher end, particularly, from Force, Red, Ultegra Di2 and Dura Ace, we're certainly seeing more and more SRAM. I don't know if you'd call it dominance, but that ratio is climbing all the time in favor of SRAM. Obviously, Shimano have had a few headwinds as of late. They've had that chainset recall, which wasn't great. Should say, recalls are nothing. SRAM have had their fair share of recalls as well. Maybe it's the way maybe Shimano have handled it. It's probably left a little bit somewhat alienated. The other thing, I think, realistically speaking, I think you know more about this than me, but I think in terms of product cycle, the Dura Ace is certainly towards the latter part of its product cycle, whereas the Red is pretty much brand new. So I think there's always going to be attraction towards the newer point.
Yeah, I think Dura Ace Ultegra 2020 or 21.
So what are we now? We're 25. So is it safe to say that we'll start to see some of the new gen in this year's Tour de France? That's typically how it would play out, with delivery commencing in September. I think, anybody keeping an eye out for that will certainly say, well, I'd rather have the new SRAM. See, not to preempt where Shimano may go, but obviously the SRAM, the fact that it's completely wireless is, I think, an attraction, and it's a benefit just to people in this modern world where we barely use a wire now to charge our phone. So yeah, look, I don't think Shimano are going to go out of business anytime soon. I think when you walk into any bike shop, Shimano probably account for about 96 or 97% of all the bikes components on the floor. But I do think we're seeing a shift in the premium high end.
Okay. What about Campag? Do you sell any Campag on your bikes? Is Campag still
Well,
on your
I
radar
actually
at
am.
all, or?
I need to just actually price up a bike for a client this morning, actually on Campbag.
Okay.
But the fact that I need to price it up means that it's not even in our generic price list, so that's not
Okay.
a good sign. So no, I'm afraid we don't do a whole lot. Of course, I think eCar was a massive boost for Campagnolo. It was and remains a great group set, but more importantly, it came at a time when Shimano had no stock, SRAM had no stock. And I think it was a massive, massive lifeline to them. However, I think the super record has been wide of the mark and a little bit, I think, underwhelming. Obviously, the price point is somewhat exorbitant. Maybe if you're that type of client, that's not a problem. But
Yeah.
the tech is already a little bit dated. So yeah, we don't do a whole lot, I'm afraid. More so on our custom side. We do have a lot of kind of diehard Campagnolo fans on our custom side.
It's a shame because that Echo was a great group set. I really liked it, but shame they didn't really follow it up with something else like an electronic version or an even cheaper version or something. Yeah, the new wireless seem to just thrown out all their sort of the thumb shifters and what they're famous for.
Yeah.
It almost feels like a desperate attempt to keep up with Shimano and SRAM rather than do what they like. Ekai's Campag doing what they do best is innovating and doing something cool and unique. Wireless just seemed a bit of a desperate
Yeah,
reaction,
I
really.
mean, everybody wants Campagnolo to win, don't they? I mean, I desperately want them to win. I know you do, most people watching this, but the reality is when people are going out to spend their hard-earned cash, I don't think it's a huge consideration for most people. I would love to see them come out with some, Ultegra type um, group set where they could get some OE business, because that's really the lifeline for a lot of these big brands. But I don't know. I kind of feel we're running out of time on that one, aren't we?
I feel like I've been rooting for Campag for about 10 years,
Yeah.
15 years maybe.
I think 15 or 20, to be honest. Um, yeah, it's a tough one. It's kind of difficult to watch, if I'm honest. I mean, no, we just mentioned Campagnolo just to go out on an absolute limb here. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see it acquired imminently. This is based on no factual data whatsoever, but I don't know. I could see someone like the UAE Sovereign Fund, who've, in fairness, done a fantastic job of camping with Colnago. I know some of the diehard Colnago fans are probably somewhat chized. It no longer has their Ernesto's signature on the frame, but I think they're doing a fantastic job of bringing a whole new wave of fresh clientele in. And is it the VR1, the new model?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, the white Y1 RS, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty bold statement to make for a brand like Colnago. And I almost feel, they don't probably need to sell hundreds and thousands of them, but it's just helping reposition that brand in a different space. But anyway, the point I was making is that brand was bought by the UAE Sovereign Fund, I believe. I think sales are up 300%.
Wow, okay.
So they have vision and they have very, very deep pockets. And, they could be the people to make Campagnolo great again.
They should have bought Campag and Colnago at the same time and got a special offer. Buy
Yeah.
one, get one free, shouldn't they?
Well, there
Like
is
package deal.
probably some sort of strategic element to it, because as when LVMH bought Pinarello, I think there could be an argument to saying, okay, you've got this big, massive fund over here, you're investing in solar energy, and over here you're doing all these infrastructure products, and here you've got a company called Colnago. So there is probably some sort of argument to say, well, we need to enlarge that basket. That if we're going to have a headquarters in North America, we need more revenue. So yeah, totally gone off on a tangent on that
I
one.
like it.
Yeah,
I like speculating. It's a lot of fun.
pure speculation.
So, as as a die-hard cyclist, a ex-pro, and now running your own bike company, do you look at other bike brands and bike models and bike companies and think, oh, they're doing a really cool job or they're doing a terrible job? Any you want to throw under the
Oh,
bus?
no, absolutely. I mean, I'm a fan, like everyone watching this. So, I'm watching your videos as they drop and everything else. And I always kind of look for the positive in each brand. I mean, there are products that I wouldn't be particularly drawn to, but there's a great story with every single brand. So no, absolutely, I am a consumer, and I'm out there with my consumer eyes on as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, well, nearly at the end of the show, so time for some quick fire questions. So put you on the spot here. So, ready?
Yeah,
Right,
I
first up,
think so.
mechanical or electronic shifting? Where you at?
Oh, electronic.
Electronic, easy.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah. Most overrated cycling trend right now?
Most overrated cycling trend. Oh my goodness, that's a good one. I mean, oh, well, I'm in agreement with everything that's going on in tire tech. Overrated trend.
Or is
I
it none?
don't I don't know. There's another one. Everyone's shifting to shorter cranks, but again, based on what we've seen on our custom side, there are a lot of kind of biomechanical and mobility. I'm sorry, this is very far from quickfire
That's
here,
okay.
but
Okay, Shimano or SRAM or Campag? Where you at?
I would have to say for the future, SRAM.
Okay. Climb or downhill? What's your favorite?
Downhill.
Favorite place in the world to ride?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, Third Down Under is about to kick off, so riding in January in shorts and short sleeves in Australia is a pretty cool thing to do, and I've been lucky enough to do that in the past.
Nice.
So yeah, let's say Adelaide for the moment. That's a cool place to be.
That's a good shout. Yeah, no disagreement from me. What's your favorite snack during a ride?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, well, not to again, this is very far from quickfire, but I took part in Badlands 2 years ago, and it became apparent that on an event like that, it's 800 kilometers long. You can't really use a traditional gel, sugary stuff. So I started to just, use a lot more kind of protein based stuff. So yeah, I'm going to say an omelet.
Omelette. Okay, yeah.
There you go.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's quite tricky in your jersey pocket.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
One piece of gear you can't live without.
That's a good question too, isn't it? Well, I've got this Gore-Tex jacket that I got back in 1996. And yeah, I've researched the brand,
Does it
obviously,
still
but
work?
it does. It's fantastic. But I remember it was pitched. We were in a pretty significant kind of high level amateur, low level professional team at the time, and it was such a innovative product that we actually had to buy it, which everybody was horrified at having to buy this thing, but I still have it, and it's still amazing because it's the type of thing, if you're cold, if you're got the bonk, you run out of energy, it's what comes out of the pocket. So yeah, it's amazing though that it's still going strong. And the only thing is now it's very big and flappy, so it certainly wouldn't be up there with all of the current
Aero.
kind of aero crop.
Okay. Aero or lightweight? Where you at? What you choose?
Oh, um, oh, I know, I clearly know the benefits of aero, but I think for the purpose of this question, I'd say lightweight.
Okay. Best piece of advice you've ever been given as a cyclist?
The cyclist, if you want to win money, you won't necessarily win races, but if you win good races, you'll win money.
Well, that's a good one. That's a good one. That's a good quote. And finally, if you weren't riding bikes or running a bike company, what would you be doing?
Oh, well, it would have to be something bike related. So I don't know, maybe I'd be holding the camera or the tripod for you on the Just Ride Bikes channel,
There's a vacant spot there. You want it? Fantastic. Well, yeah, nice to chat to you. Thank you so much for your time and sharing some of your insights into running a bike company and some of the tech trends right now. And I'll put a link to your website down below. You find more. What's on the radar this year for you as a company and a cyclist? Quickly.
Well, look, we've got a significant tailwind now with the Sika, so
Okay.
I think that's going to keep us busy for this year. We do a lot of kind of custom limited edition stuff as well, so be it our own, obviously all our custom stuff is painted in-house, but we also do some limited edition assassin colorways. We might do something with the Sika down the line as well. So yeah, looking forward to it. It's a good year.
Cool, fantastic. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Dave.